So recently, Joe Biden joined forces with the very progressive Bernie Sanders to try to partner up with Bernie Sanders' very progressive agenda. And they released a 110-page document outlining what their vision for the country looks like. So I did the dirty work for you guys. It was 110 pages. I read through a lot of it. And there's some very, very important things that you should know about this document. So let's get right into it. These are the 5 things that you should know about the Biden-Sanders initiative. So we're going to start with number 1, and that is just their overall idea, their overall thoughts and impressions on policing. And you'll see this term used many times throughout this document. Right here, you can see, as I've highlighted for you, over-policed, over-policing. They talk about how over-policed the black and brown communities are, over-policed. And then we go down right here, we see it again, over-policed black and brown communities, which I think is absolutely crazy that they're telling us that the problem in these communities, which are just running rampant with crime, like in New York City, where violent crimes are up 300%, where children are dying. Imagine telling the parents of the children that are dying every single weekend in New York City, every single weekend in Chicago, that the problem in their communities is over-policing. It's just astonishing to me that they would say these neighborhoods are over-policed. So then moving right down here, we have another statement which is just pure insanity right here. Democrats believe we need to overhaul the criminal justice system from top to bottom. Police brutality is a stain on the soul of our nation. It is unacceptable that millions of people in our country have a good reason to fear they may lose their life in a routine traffic stop, or while standing on a street corner, or while playing with a toy in a public park. Millions of people in this country have a good reason to fear they may lose their life in a traffic stop by standing on a street corner? Like, who wrote this? You would think Al Sharpton wrote this. You would think that Black Lives Matter wrote this document. They're just perpetuating the highly false narratives that are broadcasted by Black Lives Matter. Let's look at the reality, real statistics of what it looks like, of how likely an unarmed black person is to actually be involved in a fatal police shooting. A black person is 4.5 times more likely to be struck by lightning than to be unarmed and involved in a fatal police shooting. They're 36 times more likely to be involved in an accidental drowning than to be unarmed and involved in a fatal police shooting. Those are the reality of the statistics. So to push this BS, false narrative that was probably written by Al Sharpton and Black Lives Matter, that millions of people have a good reason, let me really emphasize that. They said they have a good reason to fear their lives are going to be lost, and then they just name a bunch of innocent activities. There's, black people, they're just completely cooperating. Even white people too. Let's look at everyone that is usually involved in fatal police shootings. Almost every single time they were doing something stupid. They were committing a crime. They were resisting arrest. Yet the Biden-Sanders document right here wants to perpetuate this huge lie that is broadcasted by Black Lives Matter, that millions of colored people have to live in fear that they will be killed at any time for doing something completely innocent by police. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's completely false. And it just shows you the attitude that these people have about our country. They think our country is deeply racist, that our police department has widespread systemic racism where they're targeting black individuals. Yet you look at a lot of the police departments in these cities, like in Atlanta, where the police department is 60% black. In New York, the police department is majority minority. The police department in New York is mostly minority police. And a lot of times in these police departments, minorities are overrepresented than how they're represented in the actual community. There's more minorities per capita in the police department than there's minorities in the actual city that they're policing. So are they just racist against their own people? I mean, I guess it's possible, but I just don't think so. So moving right on here. Then they go on right here. They talk about the racial wealth gap. Democrats recognize that racial wealth gaps are rooted in long-standing discrimination and unjust policies that continue to depress economic and social prosperity of people of color. Well, first off, they don't go on to name what any of these unjust policies are. Apparently, there's all these unjust policies. There's unjust laws. And this is the reason that the racial wealth gap exists. And then they go on to pretty much cite any sort of gap in terms of education, crime, wealth, to be linked to racism and discrimination. And you know what word does not appear at all in this document? You know what problem is not addressed at all in this document? Is fatherhood absence, which has been linked to show that you have a higher likelihood for pretty much everything bad is linked to fatherhood absence. Let's look at this document right here. Fatherhood absence, 4 times greater risk of poverty. We go down here, more likely to go to prison, more likely to suffer from obesity, more likely to commit crime. Even Don Lemon, the face of CNN, the face of race baiting of CNN, even back in 2013, he did a piece on the top 5 things plaguing the black community, and racism and discrimination was not listed as any of them. And I want to play a short clip of a few things that Don Lemon had mentioned in this segment right here.
A high school dropout makes on average $19,000 a year. A high school graduate makes $28,000 a year. A college graduate makes $51,000 a year. Over the course of a career, a college grad will make nearly $1 million more than a high school graduate. That's a lot of money. And number one, and probably the most important, just because you can have a baby, it doesn't mean you should, especially without planning for one or getting married first. More than 72% of children in the African American community are born out of wedlock. That means absent fathers. And the studies show that lack of a male role model is an express train right to prison. And the cycle continues. So,
did you hear that? Fatherhood absence is an express train right to prison. Even Don Lemon, race-baiting CNN anchor Don Lemon himself, before he was race-baiting CNN anchor Don Lemon, when he was back in an actual objective journalist, even admits that fatherhood absence is the most important thing that is plaguing. It is the number one thing that is plaguing the black community. And once again, we go back to this document and control find. Look, father. 0 times. You cannot find the word father in this entire document. Completely does not address fatherhood absence at all. And then moving on right here to, this is the 4th one right here. So we have 2 things. We have qualified immunity. They want to take away qualified immunity for police officers. And I'm going to explain to you why this is just an absolutely horrible, horrible idea. First off, I want to explain what qualified immunity is for those people that do not understand what it is. Qualified immunity means that you cannot file a civil lawsuit against the cop. You cannot sue the cop personally. If something bad happens to you or you believe that you were a victim of police brutality, of unjust police action, you can't personally sue the police officer, but you could still sue the police department. And then furthermore, let's look at the system that we have in place right now. If a police officer does something bad, what happens? Well, A, he gets fired immediately, especially in today's landscape where police are scrutinized and they're under a magnifying glass for every single thing that they do. Every single time they use even the smallest amount of force, it is going to be scrutinized. And if it is deemed that they used too much force, they're going to be fired immediately. And then what else can happen? They can still be prosecuted criminally. Look what happened to the officer in the Rayshard Brooks case, where he got punched in the face and Rayshard Brooks stole his taser. This guy is now on trial for murder. So, even in our current system, cops can still be charged with murder. They can get fired. This is what can happen if someone deems that a cop used too much force. So, according to Biden and Sanders, there is not strong enough action taken against cops for bad actions. And they want them to be able to be subject to civil lawsuits as well. And I will tell you why this is just an absolute horrendous, horrible idea. Because this is going to be an invitation for frivolous lawsuits. In America, you can sue anyone at any time for any reason. You don't really have to have any proof. You could file a lawsuit, and then that individual is forced to defend themselves. And what does it take to defend yourself when you get served with a lawsuit? It takes money. It takes legal fees. So now officers who are already reluctant, who are already afraid to do their jobs in today's current landscape, will be even more afraid to do their jobs in the Biden-Sanders administration. They will be very afraid to do their jobs. They won't want to do their jobs because they can get sued at any time for any reason. They will be forced to pay their own legal fees. This is probably why the police union came out and endorsed Donald Trump and did not endorse Joe Biden, because of stupid ideas like this. And then moving on, right here, we have civil rights prosecutions. Empower the federal government to hold officers accountable for civil rights violations by lowering the evidentiary intent standards for prosecuting law enforcement. So if we didn't already in this country overstate the prevalence of racially motivated crimes, then we have this, right? Where any single time a white person does anything bad to a black person, what is the assumed motive? It is racism. Well, according to Joe Biden, we're not doing enough. America does not take racism seriously enough in this country. We need to lower the standards of intent needed to prove that there was a racially motivated crime when we have 15 FBI agents that go out and investigate a rope hanging from a millionaire NASCAR driver's garage. And you mean to tell me that racism is not being taken seriously enough in this country? We need to lower the standards to prove that something is racist. When already, whenever there's a crime involving a white person to a black person, even look at awful crimes that we all agree on, right? Where Derek Chauvin kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and however many seconds. Everyone agreed that was terrible, but there is still no evidence that it was racist. The media would have you believe that Derek Chauvin was a white supremacist KKK member, that he was calling George Floyd the N-word as he was kneeling on his neck, but there's no evidence of that. So they want to lower the intent standards. So if we didn't already overstate the presence of racism, or just you find racism in every single nook and cranny and every single interaction between a white and black person, this is what the Biden administration wants. More racism, more accusations of racism. That's what this country needs. That's what's really going to divide and tear this country apart. And then the number one, probably stupidest idea out of this entire document is end cash bail. So they want to take an idea that was disastrous in New York and now implement it on a national level. That's what's going on in New York right now. There is no cash bail because idiot mayor Bill de Blasio ended cash bail. Why? Because it discriminates against poor people. Because if you go to jail and you don't have money, then you can't bail out. But guess what? Cash bail does. It keeps criminals from immediately leaving jail to commit more crimes. And that's what's happening right now. And it empowers, it emboldens criminals because they know that if there's no cash bail, they're just going to get arrested. They're going to be fingerprinted. And then they're going to be released. And what's going to happen is they're going to commit more crimes. It's already a disastrous policy in New York City. And they want to implement this disastrous policy nationwide. I mean, this will ruin our country. Can you imagine? Someone gets arrested, someone attacks you, someone threatens you, they get arrested, and you would hope, like, okay, wow, I'm so glad that they're arrested. Now I'm safe. They're not going to come back to hurt and harm me. And now they immediately bond out, and now they're pissed off, and they're going to come back with a vengeance that they were arrested for doing something bad to you. This is going to cause crime to spiral out of control, just like what is happening in New York City. It is a disastrous policy that will ruin America. So that's all I have for you today. Those are the 5 things that you should know about this document. And I mean, if you want to take more time, you could read through this. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't even cover. There are so many crazy, insane, absolute, just ridiculous, dumb ideas that this document is absolutely loaded with. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Like my video, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.